Paula Drogi, and this is my search for a material soul. Last week, I had oral surgery to get an implant for a crown. That's why my posting schedule is a bit behind. If you don't know what's involved in getting a crown, you're lucky, although it's probably just a matter of time. Aging, things fall apart. Just before putting me under, the surgeon asked what I was thinking about in advance of the surgery. The answer is, I was thinking about death. Though it's a very routine procedure, something could go wrong anytime you go under anesthesia. So I'd been thinking that if the end came that day, I would be at peace with that. Basically, that's the point of the previous episode, In Defense of Death. Of course, I didn't say that to the surgeon. It seems unwise to freak out your surgeon right before undergoing a procedure. Better that he think of me as calm and unconcerned, and that's what I said. I wasn't thinking of anything. A good lie if ever there was one. While I do believe we should recognize the value of death and talk more about death, there are times to avoid the topic. Now that I'm on the far side of surgery, the time to avoid talking about death has passed. In defending death, I argue that it's essential to give life meaning. But what happens after death? I don't know. And according to the materialist view, no one could possibly know. For a materialist, everything can be explained in material, which is physical terms. Everything we see, feel, and are. If all available evidence is physical, then we couldn't know anything about the supernatural, even if it exists. Recently, my friend Micah asked for a definition of materialism. I realized that the definition I had given at the beginning of this journey could use some elaboration. Here's what I said in Season 1, Episode 1, How I Got Started. It's the view that human minds are entirely composed of earthly materials such as neurons and synapses. The main opposition is dualism, the view that minds are non-physical, a different sort of stuff or property. In relation to this blog, and particularly this episode, a central motivation for dualism is a belief that the mind continues after death. Since there is incontrovertible evidence that the physical brain and body turn to dust after death, the mind must be separate from the physical brain and body in order to continue on to heaven or whatever. One problem for this view is specifying exactly what the mind is such that it could continue. As I argued in Season 1, Episode 6, Why Consciousness is Not the Soul, your current conscious experience is too fleeting and superficial to be who you are essentially. If something like the soul exists, it must somehow include my memories, decisions, and character. And all evidence indicates that these features of myself are housed in my brain and body. See Season 1, Episode 7, Knitted in the Womb. As a side note, a Google image search on soul reveals very, very few imaginative depictions of anything non-physical. Aside from images from the movie Soul, they mostly show a body stylized with light beaming in all directions. Google's AI Gemini responded to my request to create an image of a non-physical soul in this way. I am unable to create images of non-physical or abstract concepts. I can create images of physical objects, scenes, or characters. Another problem for dualism is that all evidence is physical. Everything that we can see, touch, and measure is by definition a form of physical evidence. It can only serve as evidence for non-physical supernatural phenomena if it cannot be explained in relation to other physical things and relations. Consciousness seems to be non-physical because it doesn't seem to be explicable in terms of brain processes. The feeling of pain just doesn't seem to be nerves firing. It seems to be something more, something private and internal. Even so, all evidence for consciousness is physical, what people say and how they respond to stimuli. Arguments for a non-physical mind are based on inference rather than evidence. Deductive reasoning is the heart of philosophy, and my point here is not to follow current trends in valuing science over other forms of knowledge. Nonetheless, a theory that is consistent with physical evidence is arguably better than a theory that runs counter to it. Your reasons have to be very strong to stand against the accumulated weight of scientific theory. The principal question is whether reports can be explained by physical things and relations. If they cannot, then the inference to something non-physical is justified. For consciousness in general, and things like near-death experiences in particular, the failure of scientific explanation is the reason to reject materialism. Most convincing of the evidence for life after death are reports from out-of-body experiences that provide verified, accurate information of events that happened while the person was in the operating room. Some people have described surgical instruments or events in another part of the hospital or even in another part of the country. Somewhat less convincing are predictions about future events, which are offset by predictions that don't come true. Others have reported meeting people who have died at the same time as the person's near-death experience. For people who have had these experiences, and for family, friends, and often the doctors who hear these reports and verify their accuracy, this evidence does not seem explicable in any other way than as information gathered by a non-physical soul. For a materialist, there seems ample opportunity for a person to learn this information both during the operation and during the time of the recovery. It's known that auditory information can be processed even when a person is unconscious or semi-conscious. So the sound of surgical instruments or discussion of them in the operating room could have informed the patient's memory. Nursing staff and family members talking in the patient's room after surgery is another source of information. The bottom line for me is that a disembodied soul raises more questions than it answers. What exactly continues on after my body stops functioning? How could I see or feel or touch without a body? Where are my memories and thoughts stored without a brain to house them when I'm not using them? Nothing about who or what I am makes sense without a body. Now, I'm not closing the door on the possibility of an afterlife or an existence of something beyond what we know in the physical world. My search for a material soul is not over yet, and so far I've mostly canvassed topics that can be fairly well explained by materialism. I'd like to look more deeply at the spiritual aspects of life to see how they fit or fail to fit with my views on the material nature of mind, consciousness, and the self. In the next and last episode of the season, I'll look back on some of the journey so far and scout a bit ahead to see what might lie in the future. Hope to see you then.